Good morning, Year 11. This week you're going to answer the 16-mark question. By 1540, England had become a Protestant country. How far do you agree with this judgment? You've got 2 lessons this week, and I would like you to have submitted your complete essay by the Friday deadline, please. It's really important that you keep up with the work that's being set. But I have made this PowerPoint audio support guide for you to talk you through the question and to revisit the work that you would have completed independently last week so that everybody can have a good go at answering this question and doing well. The booklet also contains a writing frame that you can use. I've also copied that into Satchel 1, and I'm very happy if you just copy and paste it into a Word document and then add in the evidence and analysis. It will provide you with the frame that you need in order to do really well for this type of question. First, it would help to understand what was wrong with the Catholic faith and the areas that Cromwell wished to change. The first area is to do with power, and the Pope, as leader of the Catholic Church, had immense power and control within all Catholic countries across Europe. This posed a massive problem for Henry when he asked to have his marriage to Catherine of Aragon annulled. The Pope refused. Wolsey was unable to get him to change his mind and was unsuccessful in working with Cardinal Campeggio. And so Cromwell came up with an alternative, and he said that actually the Pope should have no say in how England should be run because England was an independent empire, it was an independent country. And the Act of Supremacy was passed in 1534 that made Henry in charge of the church in England. This meant that he could make all decisions that affected England, and also he owned all land that had previously belonged to the church. This links to our second point of wealth. The church was incredibly wealthy. It owned a huge proportion of land in England, and the monasteries and nunneries where monks and nuns lived, the holy religious houses where they lived, was also very wealthy, or were also very wealthy. And Cromwell realised that this could be used to increase the revenue, the money for the crown, for the king. So it's no surprise that in 1536 he dissolves the smaller monasteries, and in 1539 he has a law passed, or an act passed, a law and an act, the same thing, to dissolve the larger monasteries. And there's so much money coming in from the sale of these monasteries that a court of augmentations is set up to handle the money coming in. The land is quite often sold off to wealthy nobles, which they're very grateful for because they can increase their own wealth by renting out that land. But also it gets them on side and on board with some of the religious changes that are being made. And finally, we've got Catholic beliefs and practices, and this is quite important to understand. All Catholics believed in 7 sacraments: the idea of baptism, confirmation, Holy Eucharist, confession, matrimony, holy orders, and the anointing of the sick. Please do read about these 7 ideas. If you stop the slide and read it yourself, that would be useful. And the Bible was written in Latin, and the priest would liaise with God on your behalf when you went to church. Now, Cromwell disagreed with this, and he said that of these 7 sacraments, only 3 should be allowed: baptism, Eucharist, and doing penance for your sins. So this was a significant change away from the Catholic faith and Catholic ideas, and it moved England more towards the Protestant faith. Also, English Bibles were introduced in every church, which was a Protestant practice. So we can see here by a summary, we can see that the power of the church was removed and Henry replaced that of the Pope. We can see that the wealth of the church was removed and taken by Cromwell for the crown through the selling off of the monasteries and lands. And the beliefs and the practices significantly changed with the removing of the 7 sacraments and reducing them to only 3, and the replacement of Latin Catholic Bibles with English Bibles, which were Protestant ideas. So let's have a little look at how this work links with the work that you did last week. In order to bring about change, laws have to be passed, and the word act means law. So the first act that we see is that of the submission of the clergy in 1532. Cromwell forced all archbishops and bishops to agree in public that the king was their lawmaker, and this was an important first step because it reduced the power of the Pope. So you can see my symbol for power appearing there. The Act in restraint of appeals to Rome also prevented anybody from appealing to the Pope against a decision made by the king. It effectively shut the Pope out of English affairs. This was really important in preventing Catherine of Aragon going to the Pope and appealing against the annulment of her marriage to Henry. The Treason Act was also passed, which listed all the crimes punishable by execution. And interestingly, the accused did not have to actually take action against the king. Simply saying something negative was enough to have you accused of treason, which was a very serious crime, obviously punishable by death. In 1534, the Act of Succession was passed, and this was very important because this is the act, the law, that made the marriage between Catherine and Henry invalid, and therefore it made Princess Mary, Catherine and Henry's daughter, no longer in line for succession, and it recognised Henry's marriage to Anne Boleyn and their daughter Elizabeth as his legal heir. Henry always hoped that he would have a son with Anne Boleyn. It declared also that it was treason for anyone to criticise Henry's marriage to Anne. In 1534, the Act of Supremacy was passed, which officially made Henry the supreme head of the Church of England, and all religious orders had to swear an oath recognising this. The Pope's authority in England was completely rejected. So you can see that so far, all of those laws are to do with power. Now, the next law is to do with money. The Act for the Dissolution of the Lesser Monasteries in 1536. These monasteries were shut down, the land was sold off, and the crown was able to make quite a lot of money from it. The next thing that we see happening is some religious change. The Act of 10 Articles was passed, and this is going to be relevant to your work. It says that of the 7 sacraments, only 3 mattered: baptism, the Eucharist, and doing penance for sins. And this would agree with the question that England was becoming more Protestant because it was rejecting 4 key Catholic practices. We then see the royal injunctions to the clergy being passed in 1538, and this was an even further level of Protestant reform, in fact the highest point of Protestant reform. Amongst other changes, it actually brought in English Bibles, and it also said that holy relics were removed from churches. A holy relic could be, for example, a chest containing saints' bones, or any objects that were believed to have had religious significance and therefore possibly religious power. Cromwell said that these were superstitious items that had no places in churches. And all parishes were asked to record births, marriages and deaths. So these were significant religious reforms. We then see in 1539 the Act for the Dissolution of the Greater Monasteries, again making a great deal of money for Henry. But interestingly, in 1539, we see a reversal of some of the religious reforms, hence it's in red. There's a radical shift back towards more Catholic beliefs, and the Act of 10 Articles seems to be reconsidered, and Henry steps in here almost as if he feels Cromwell's gone too far. And just three years later, he is now restoring several Catholic beliefs that had earlier been banned, one of which is that people now could have a private mass if they wished. So, if we're having a look at our question, by 1540 England had become a Protestant country, how far do you agree with this question? We are going to probably need 20 to 30 minutes to answer this question and make sure we've got a balanced argument. So let's have a look at some of the key evidence that you could put in your essay. If you have a look at this slide, you can see the reforms that clearly agree with the question in green, the reforms that challenge the question and disagree with it in red, and then in yellow, the Act of 10 Articles, although mostly agreeing that change had occurred, it does show that 3 of those 7 sacraments were still followed under the new rules. And therefore, it doesn't show a total departure from Catholic ideas, but a significant one, certainly. You're going to use these when you answer your exam question as examples of evidence. You'll note in your booklets there is a support writing frame, and I'm very happy for you to literally use the words that I've typed in and complete the sentences. The most important thing to remember with the how far do you agree question is to give good examples of evidence, fully explaining what they mean, the different acts that you're referring to, and making sure that you analyse why this either agrees and shows that England was becoming a Protestant country, or showing that you actually disagree with the question and it shows that Catholic practices still continued. I think the most important thing to remember when answering a how far do you agree question is to make sure that you keep going back to that question of how far do you agree, and use connectives, words such as I strongly agree, I partially agree. This therefore shows a significant movement in a new direction, or you perhaps could say a more cautious return to some Catholic ideas, when perhaps you might be talking about the laws that brought some of the religious forms back to the Catholic faith, like the Act of 6 Articles. So good luck with your essay. I will be online on MS Teams for the first 30 minutes, but I have recorded this to support those of you that perhaps can't access MS Teams, or if we encounter any difficulties, you've got this as a permanent reminder when you come to write your essay. Good luck with it. Don't forget, you can also message me on Satchel One. I am working from about 8:30, probably till about 8:30 at night, every school day, and look a little bit at the weekends as well. So I am here to help you. But if you could please submit your essays and try your very hardest to do a good job for me and for yourself, and submit that by Friday, I will give you feedback over the weekend so that you have some more evidence of achievement within this particular topic and paper 2. Thanks for listening. I hope that this is of help. And although I'm not with you face to face in a classroom, I am very much still here to support you over the next few months whilst we are learning from home. Thanks ever so much, guys. Take care.